Thank you very much, Prime Minister. I would not use slides because I know it's a very long day, and I will make it very short, my intervention. I think, first of all, we all agreed that maybe violent conflict, civil unrest, and political instability, and serious lack of good governance has stood the first in our discussions as that causes of food and humanitarian crisis. So how can we deal with this issue is critical. And most of you are from academics and, so those of us who try to pass through the politics, I think we have to say something about it. And I expect this to also from the Prime Minister. The first thing is there are two sides of a coin of actors. The first one is the domestic actors, as you have seen. Maybe we can combine the domestic and regional actors in the violent conflict. And most of the presenters has shown us this side. But we have also the other side of the coin, which is the global actors. So we need to bring both the domestic and regional actors and also the global actors to work in unison to bring about peace and tranquility in our countries and our regions. Otherwise, this crisis will continue looming, and we need to address that. To me, as far as I am concerned, there are some signs of positive changes that are taking place. A good example is in the Horn of Africa, my own country, Ethiopia, there is a domestic peace agreement that has been signed very recently, and there is a process also to continue signing with other fighting groups in the country, and this is one of the good signs. And there is also, as my brother presented on Lake Chad Basin, we have countries coming together as group of five to fight Boko Haram and other extremist groups. And this time it's improving from time to time. And I think we have to capitalize on those things to help proceed on addressing the conflict situation. In Yemen, as Professor Doctor has presented, there are some signs, at least from the local level of interventions, but the Arab League, as was said, is coming up. So the regional economic communities, and in case of African Union, and maybe G20, as far as groups at the global level should come together to discuss this issue. To me, the UN Security Council has become very much polarized, and it has not progressed so much so far. But what we can see is there are groupings in G20. Now African Union is in the process of becoming the member of G20, and that agenda has to come forth in the discussions so that peace is one of the major issues of humanitarian crisis and food crisis at this time. I think this academy and the Vatican can also play a major role as far as I am concerned in advocacy and messaging to the global community to bring about peace and tranquility in these countries. I think it's an important undertaking that has to be done, not bypassing. I know Vatican is doing something good in DRC and South Sudan, but it is bypassing. It's not the major agenda item for the Vatican as well as the Academy to work on it. And I plea that this should be a major agenda of advocacy and also engagement with global community, especially members of G20, and you can influence. So I think this is one of the issues which I just wanted to mention. The next issue is, there is a growing impact of climate change related zoonotic diseases, pandemic. I think this pandemic is going to recur. scientists are telling us that this is not going to be the end. There will be a number of recurring pandemic that to happen in the future as well. So it is not just an episode, it is a creeping crisis, and we have to look into that carefully. So I think this is related to climate change and the environmental and biodiversity degradation. And we need to look into that, how to work, the global instruments like COP28 coming, and also COP15 that has happened for the biodiversity, crisis issue that has been addressed, but has to come together to work very hard. It is more of a political solution than scientific solution this time. So there should be funding to deal with this issue, and the global commitments has to be respected. This is responsible for, if you see, 3/4 of the IDPs, the floods, droughts, and everything that comes in. But there are also positive things. The flooding, if it is managed properly, so the water stress can be handled in such a way that it can help rather than the drought. So I think that needs funding, and the global community has to come forth in this regard. And I think very important. So we see that our food system is vulnerable, and it is exposed because of all these causes we mentioned in our presentations. So I think we need to fix that for a longer term, and a food systems approach, which most of you has mentioned. The first and foremost thing, we have to agree that the traditional food and hunger crisis response, which is focused on humanitarian and emergency food aid, has become insufficient. And therefore, we need to address this perpetual and cyclic crisis. Maybe, this food aid and emergency aid can give some relief on our day's bed, but it doesn't bring the changes we expect to come. So we have to look into this crisis as a compounded, and also, Dr. John, Dr. Sikandia, and Dr. Fazula, the three of them said we need a holistic, solution. It is compounded. It is, it's intensified. It's a long term. So we need to have a holistic solution. So long-term approach to food crisis response is essential, and I think this is the outcome of our discussions. We have, of course, we should base our response on existing best practices, innovations, and tools on our disposal. I think a number of tools has been presented in this workshop, and these are the best practices. We have to use them, not just an academic exercise, but use them as a tool to address those issues. So I think a number of them has been said. Dr. Were was mentioning about some of the issues he didn't mention, like the productive safety net program in Ethiopia, one of the best programs that has addressed very well, combining both the short-term and long-term, issues, which has been highly adaptive and community-based and flexible and inclusive, both rural and urban communities. And I think this kind of best practices has to be emulated, and we should be working very hard on that. One striking example is, I was trying to compare Indonesia vis-a-vis Nigeria. If you see the population size, they are equal. If you see the oil production amount, they are equal, almost close to each other. And if you see the land mass, which is for agriculture, they are almost similar. But Nigeria has something like 63% below poverty line, and Indonesia is only 8% below poverty line. What is the difference? The first one is good governance. You all will agree with me. But the second one is, the water stress management. Indonesia irrigated all its agriculture like 60%, but Nigeria is only 2%. So there is a big gap, even to address the climate calamities. Water stress management is very important, and Asian countries have surpassed Africans in this regard. So the hydrological infrastructure issue, which IPRI has put in its document, is essential and has to be addressed. And if we want to invest, then we need to have a very clear public policy support to agriculture and food systems in respective countries. I think a very good thing has been said in Syria, even though it's a grassroots movement. The food system and agricultural policy support has been a little bit going further. But most importantly, Dr. Sheikhi has put in place very well, and that needs funding. So every country has to put sizable amounts of its budget in this regard. That's the difference between Asians and Africans. They put more than 20% of their budget on agricultural policy and implementation. So I think this is very essential lesson we have to learn. We have CADIP program, which all of you know, that 10% at least should be allocated, but the average is now only 3%. So only few countries, only 4 countries in Africa did that. We have to push this further. So I think these are issues that we have to address. And finally, we need to invest. Now, I would like to thank the US government. We have the US Africa Food Security Initiative going on. I co-chair together with some of the colleagues in the White House representing Africa. And we are moving towards, bringing about a clear sign of investment in our food systems. So it's a big push is needed, investing in our food system. And that needs global financial institutions to be involved. And if US has showed a commitment, and we have to continue, and of course Europeans has to follow suit, and all the global community in this regard, without excluding even the Eastern blocs like China and other Asian countries. So we have to invest in climate smart agriculture, as I said, in irrigation and water stress management, in green energy, green transport, and logistics and market infrastructure, and that includes oil and digital infrastructure. So that investment is a crucial aspect. We need a Marshall Plan. Some of you said about the Marshall Plan, talking about the European issue, but that kind of investment is needed. I think a lingering food and emergency support will not bring the desired change for our countries. So we need to have a big push and big investment to happen. That's where we can, break the cycle. Otherwise, we'll continue on lingering with this process, and it cannot change the whole scenario. So these are some of the points I can mention, and I think Dr. Omar can supplement. Thank you.